He handed me the box with a grin I hadn't seen in years. Wrapped in gold paper satin ribbon perfectly tied too perfect. "I thought you'd love this one," he said, eyes gleaming. It wasn't even my scent. The moment I lifted the bottle from its velvet cradle, I knew. It was floral. Overpowering. Heavy like the perfume clinging to his coat last week. I hadn't worn florals since college. He knew that. So who exactly was this gift meant for? I smiled. Tightly. "I'll wear it next time we go out," I whispered. He kissed my cheek and turned back to the television. 3 days later, I opened the kitchen drawer. The junk one: receipts, coupons, expired batteries. A boutique slip peeked out beneath a pile of grocery lists. I unfolded it, barely breathing. "To Vanessa R. To new beginnings. You deserve this." The date was our anniversary. The perfume, the message, the handwriting, all of it. Not for me, never for me. That night, I served him dinner in silence. He talked about market swings. I nodded, but all I could hear was the quiet shatter of 19 years. I looked across the table at the man I thought I knew. And I made a decision. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg. But I would not disappear quietly. Would you fight back or walk away? Where are you listening from tonight, and have you ever smelled someone else's perfume on your life? Andrew and I met at a mutual friend's barbecue in Durham back when I still believed in things like fate and shared playlists. He was calm, polished, and a little too charming, but I mistook that for confidence. By the time I moved to Charlotte and started my job at Ellis, Mayer and Jensen, we were already sharing grocery lists. It didn't take long. He knew how to listen. And I'd spent years being talked over. We married in the spring of 2006 under a canopy of white magnolia blossoms in my mother's backyard. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. And for a while, I believed in that version of us. Our daughter Sarah was born a year later. 10 pounds, strong lungs, curious eyes. She made me softer. Made him too for a while. He started saving more. Worked late but always texted. We weren't perfect, but we felt solid. By 2010, I was the executive assistant to the firm's managing partner. Structured days. Meetings color-coded. Calendars pristine. At home, I handled the bills, doctor's appointments, everything school-related. Andrew made good money, and he let me manage it all. He said I had the brain for it. It was meant as a compliment. But some days it felt like a quiet abdication. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners, planned beach vacations in the Carolinas, clipped coupons, even when we didn't need to. Andrew had his own routines: dry cleaning Saturdays, gym Tuesdays, poker nights every other Friday. Nothing ever felt off. Until maybe 2 years ago. The gap started small. He began forgetting things: what I wore to Sarah's graduation, the name of my new coworker, where we kept the holiday dishes. He used to notice everything. Now I had to repeat myself. Often, he said he was tired. I believed him. Then came the cologne. A new scent, sharp and unfamiliar one he never wore around me. He said it was from a gift basket at work. And then the gym bag he forgot in the trunk overnight. A receipt for 2 entrees at a wine bar I'd never heard of. The cash withdrawals spaced perfectly to avoid attention. Still, I didn't ask, didn't accuse. I wanted so badly to believe it was just age fatigue, bad timing. There was always a reason, and he always had it ready. When our anniversary came around, I thought maybe we were turning a page. We'd booked a dinner at a steakhouse downtown. Sarah had called that afternoon, said she was doing well in college. The weather was cool, breezy, my favorite. He wore his gray blazer. The one I'd picked out for him before his promotion. Said it made him feel serious. He brought flowers. Peonies. I hate peonies. They remind me of funerals. But I smiled and said thank you. Dinner was pleasant. That's the only word I can use. Not warm, not romantic. Just pleasant. Like 2 strangers playing out a scene they'd rehearsed years ago. Then came the gift. And everything shifted. I remember thinking, this isn't for me. But I thanked him anyway. I always thanked him. The next day, I told Janelle, my best friend since high school, that something felt off. She offered to come over with lemon cake and wine. But I told her I needed to be alone. Instead, I cleaned. Scrubbed the kitchen, wiped the drawer handles, rearranged the mail, anything to push the unease away. That's when I found the receipt. It had slipped under an old electric bill. I wasn't even looking for it, but the universe doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it hands you truth in 12-point font. To Vanessa R., to New Beginnings. You deserve this. A boutique in South Park. Date stamped 2 days before our anniversary. The floor felt like it shifted under my feet. Not a tremor. Not an earthquake. Just a subtle tilt enough to know nothing would ever be straight again. I stood there for a long time holding that receipt like it was the final page of a book I didn't know I was reading. Vanessa R., I remembered her. Slick brunette bob, nude lipstick, diamond studs. We met once briefly at a real estate mixer. Andrew had introduced her as a client, nothing more. And I'd shaken her hand thinking nothing of it, thinking she was just another stranger in a blazer. Funny how you can stand face to face with the person who will ruin you, and not even flinch. I didn't confront him that night. I reheated leftovers and folded laundry. I even watched half an episode of that home renovation show we used to like before everything started to feel like drywall cracking beneath paint. But I couldn't sleep. The receipt sat in my bedside drawer nestled between expired coupons and a card Sarah had made me in 5th grade. I opened that drawer 3 times before morning. Each time the words stared back at me. To New Beginnings. By the 3rd night, I couldn't pretend anymore. I started doing what I do best, organizing things. Quietly, efficiently. My first step was our shared calendar. The one we'd been using for over a decade. He'd stopped syncing his updates about 6 months ago, claiming the firm's internal system was too clunky to export. So I checked old entries, doctor's appointments, client dinners, poker nights, and I cross-referenced them with receipts, restaurant bills, and emails from our joint inbox. He'd lied. Not dramatically, not even consistently, but just enough. There was no firm dinner the night he claimed to be in Raleigh. Instead, a Lyft charge appeared at midnight pickup from the boutique hotel downtown. Drop off, same address I found on Vanessa's realty website. A friend might say ask him, talk to him. Give him a chance to explain. But if you've ever been quietly betrayed, you know it's not about screaming, it's about not being surprised anymore. And I wasn't. Instead, I made copies. Screenshots. A spreadsheet color-coded by event type. I worked on it after work, before bed, sometimes on my lunch break. 15 minutes here, 20 there. The kind of precision I used to plan Sarah's high school graduation party. Only this time I wasn't decorating tables, I was dismantling the lie I'd been living in. Around week 2, I checked his text backups. He'd been sloppy, forgotten to log out of his iCloud account on the kitchen laptop. I wasn't proud of what I did. But I also wasn't sorry. There it was. Dinner was perfect. Loved the wine. Loved you more, Vanessa. Another message: should I wear the red dress this weekend? You always say it's your favorite. I had to close the screen. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. Stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't devastated. She was calculating. I dried my hands, walked into the hallway, and saw Andrew's jacket hanging over the banister. Not his usual one. A newer, sleeker cut. Still with the price tag attached inside. He hadn't even noticed. The next Saturday, I called Janelle. We met at our usual spot, Rusty's Diner right off Providence. Same vinyl booths, same burnt coffee. She listened as I told her everything. I watched her face shift, anger, disbelief, that slow exhale women give when betrayal confirms something they already feared. You okay? She asked softly. I'm tired, I said. Then paused. And I'm not stupid. She nodded. You're not. And you're not alone. She didn't offer advice. Didn't push. She just slid her hand across the table and covered mine. Sometimes that's all you need. Someone who doesn't try to fix it. Just sees you clearly. Back home, Andrew was in the den watching football. I kissed his cheek like always. He barely looked up. In the following days, I became invisible by design. I let him forget I was in the room. Stopped asking questions. Stopped reminding him about appointments, birthdays, even the grocery list. I watched him operate in his own orbit, moving between his job, his gym, his lies with practiced ease. But behind the silence, I was building something. I added new folders to my desktop. Downloaded old bank statements. Tracked unusual withdrawals and purchases he assumed I'd never notice. There was a dinner for two at Lecco's, a restaurant we'd promised to try together. He went without me. A bill from a flower delivery service. Not on Valentine's Day, not our anniversary, just Tuesday. Delivery address in office suite downtown. I drove by during my lunch hour. Vanessa's name was on the glass. I sat in my car parked across the street, engine off, fingers clenched around the steering wheel. I didn't cry, but something inside me did settle. It was real. It wasn't in my head. And now I had proof. That evening Andrew came home late, said there'd been traffic. I nodded, handed him a plate of reheated casserole. He kissed the top of my head and went to shower. I sat at the table watching steam rise from my own untouched plate, and I thought, he has no idea I know. Not yet. The breaking point didn't come with fireworks. It came with a password reset email. I was cleaning the fridge, one of those numb autopilot Saturday afternoons. Andrew had left for the gym, said he might stop for a smoothie afterward. Smoothies had become his new thing. Apparently Vanessa liked green spirulina. I was tossing out expired yogurt when my phone buzzed. Your password has been successfully updated for our joint online bank account. But I hadn't touched it. I froze. My hands still smelled faintly of garlic from the pasta I'd cooked the night before. I washed them slowly. Then sat down at the kitchen island. Same stool, same tile floor, same quiet house. I tried to log in. Access denied. I tried again. Nothing. He had changed the password to the account I'd managed for nearly 2 decades. He'd once joked that I ran our household like a Fortune 500 company. I used to take it as a compliment. Now it sounded like a setup. That evening, I waited. I didn't ask. Didn't mention the email. Just watched him eat the lasagna I made and compliment the seasoning like nothing had changed, but everything had. At 2 a.m., once I was sure he was asleep, I opened the guest room closet. Dug out my emergency file, the one with my own documents, my own backups separate from the household binder. I didn't sleep that night. By Sunday I had requested full account recovery using secondary verification, my phone number, my social. I was back in by noon. And what I saw made my stomach turn. Andrew had moved $12,000 from our savings into a new personal account at a credit union I'd never heard of. Quietly. Over 3 months. Just enough at a time to avoid suspicion. But he'd underestimated me. Again. I printed the statements. Marked each transfer. Cross-referenced dates with Vanessa's known listings and social media activity. On the 3rd weekend of October, he wired $1,000. That same weekend, Vanessa posted a closing day photo holding champagne on the porch of a lakeside cabin. I'd never seen that cabin. But it was definitely our money. I showed Janelle the documents a few days later. We sat on her porch, coffee going cold, autumn leaves catching in the breeze. He's staging his exit, she said flatly. I know. You think he's planning to tell you number? I stared into my cup. He's planning to just disappear. Or make me think it was mutual. That hit harder than I expected, because that's what scared me most. Not the cheating, not even the money. It was the rewriting of our story. The idea that I would become a footnote in my own marriage. I wasn't going to let that happen. The next time he mentioned work stress, I asked nothing. When he left for a late client dinner, I nodded. I even made him a lunch to take the next day. But every night, after dishes and emails and checking in with Sarah over FaceTime, I worked. I built a folder labeled just in case. It included text logs, transfer receipts, Vanessa's listings. Hotel bookings made in Andrew's name using travel points I'd redeemed. Audio recordings of voicemail slips. One from Vanessa. Can't wait to see you next weekend, so glad you're finally taking the steps. It wasn't just adultery, it was orchestration. He wasn't slipping. He was planning. Carefully. Cautiously. But not cautiously enough. Then the final push came quietly. I was home early from work. Rain had shut down the office HVAC, and they sent us home at noon. His laptop was open on the dining table. Unlocked. He must have stepped into the garage because I only had 2 minutes. I didn't snoop, didn't dig. I opened the browser history. One entry. Best ways to divide assets in a North Carolina divorce. I closed the screen just as I heard the door open. He smiled. Hey, you're home early. Yeah, I said. Storm's bad downtown. He kissed my cheek. His lips were warm. I wanted to throw him across the room. Instead, I made tea. Saturday across from him. Watched him type an email calm as ever. And I thought, you think I'll be blindsided? That I'll cry. Collapse. Lose. But I'd already started rewriting the story mine. That night I took off my wedding ring, placed it in the back of my drawer. Not to make a scene. Just to remind myself of one quiet truth. This marriage was already over. Only the paperwork remained. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of clarity. Not peace, not yet. But direction. There's a numbness that sets in when you've accepted the end. And I had. Andrew left early, some emergency with a client's portfolio. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He hadn't in weeks. I made coffee in silence. Brewed the dark roast he liked out of habit. Then poured it down the sink. That was the day I stopped performing. No more coordinating his dry cleaning. No more calendar reminders, no more. Did you pack your umbrella texts? Let him forget. Let him get wet. He didn't notice. And that said more than anything. That week I started shifting things. Quietly. I met with a lawyer, Marissa Grant, a recommendation from Janelle. Middle-aged, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She didn't pity me. She respected me. Are you looking to leave or looking to win, she asked. I'm looking to walk away clean, I said. Not empty. We drafted a financial snapshot, joint assets, property equity, his retirement accounts, my pension, savings, and those mysterious transfers I'd been tracking. When I told her about the password change and the boutique receipt, she didn't flinch. This is more common than you think, she said, but you're ahead of the game. Most women wait too long. I nodded, but my throat tightened. Because deep down I had waited. Too long to trust my instincts. Too long to admit the distance. Too long to stop covering for him. That night I sat in the living room, lights dim, a glass of wine untouched. I stared at the photo on the wall, our wedding, spring of 2006. Magnolias. My mother in blue. Andrew's hand resting on my waist, eyes crinkled with laughter. I took it down, wiped the dust from the frame, then placed it face down in the drawer. I wasn't erasing the past. I was ending the performance. Sarah called that weekend. Her voice light, talking about classes, a roommate who always left the fridge open. I'm thinking of coming home for Thanksgiving, she said. You and Dad doing anything special? I hesitated. He'd booked a conference in Atlanta that weekend. But Sarah didn't need to know that. Not yet. Come home, I said. Just you and me. We'll do something different this year. She laughed. Like frozen pizza and a Hallmark movie, exactly. When we hung up, I felt it for the first time in weeks. A flicker of warmth. Of what still mattered. The following Monday, I updated all my passwords. Created a new bank account in my name only. Transferred my salary and automatic deposits. I canceled a shared credit card and ordered a new one, just mine. Andrew didn't notice. He was too busy texting in the garage, taking calls in the driveway, wearing cologne that didn't smell like home. One night, I heard him in the bathroom. His voice low, careful. Next month. Just a little more time. She's not suspicious. I stood outside the door silent, then walked away. He didn't even lock it. A few days later, I bought a new file box, filled it with documents, copies of everything I'd collected. I labeled it me, not just my initials, but a reminder. Mine. Everything I rebuild from this will be mine. At work, I stayed late. Filed. Sorted. Cleaned the coffee machine, fixed the supply order that someone else messed up. Routine kept me steady. Until Vanessa walked in. She came into the office for a meeting with our real estate team. Our firm was expanding, and she was one of the agents in the bid. I hadn't seen her in person since that fundraiser over a year ago, but I recognized her immediately. Dark hair, crisp white blazer, nude heels. That same curated perfection. She didn't notice me. She smiled at the receptionist, complimented someone's earrings, walked with confidence down the hallway. She had no idea the woman managing the schedules, typing the minutes, was the wife of the man she was sleeping with. And somehow that gave me more power than I expected. She didn't know who I was anymore. But I knew everything. I didn't confront her, didn't glare. I simply offered her a coffee. And made sure she saw the name on my badge, Maggie Ellis. The twitch in her jaw lasted half a second. But I caught it. She knew, not everything, but enough. That night I added her name to the folder. Vanessa, appearance at firm the 17th of October. Date, time, witnesses. I wasn't documenting just for court, I was documenting for me. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to save my marriage. I was building my exit, no longer a victim, no longer a secretary in my own life. I was the one keeping the record. By early November, our home was a museum. Quiet, curated, and filled with things no one looked at anymore. Andrew and I moved like distant colleagues, sharing space, avoiding touch, speaking only when necessary. He was always late from work. I was always already asleep. It worked. Or at least it didn't explode. On the surface, we were still married. Still the Ellis couple with the manicured lawn and the neutral throw pillows. Still the pair who smiled for Christmas cards and posed next to Sarah at campus visits. But beneath that shell, I was making moves. Every day, I checked something off my list, switched car insurance to my name, transferred the title of my grandmother's bracelet, which Andrew once called too old-fashioned, booked a consult with a second lawyer just for backup. Janelle offered to come over and help me clean out the attic. "We'll start fresh," she said, holding up a box labeled Wedding Backup Prints. Inside, I found the thank you cards I never sent. The ones for people who gave us engraved picture frames and monogrammed towels. I ran my fingers across the cardstock, stiff with dust and regret. "Do you want to keep these?" she asked gently. I dropped the entire stack into the donation pile. The next day, I packed a small bag and left it in the trunk of my car, just in case. Meanwhile, Andrew was busy with tax planning meetings and urgent portfolios. He started spending nights away, said the firm had booked him into a conference near Asheville. I nodded. I didn't ask for details. I already had them. Elena Rodriguez had them, actually. She was the private investigator Marissa recommended. Discreet, professional. The kind of woman who didn't blink when I handed her a printed spreadsheet of Andrew's last 3 months. Within 2 weeks, she'd sent me footage, timestamped, location verified. Andrew and Vanessa at a resort in Highlands. Dinner. Same table. Same wine we served on our 10th anniversary. There was no kiss. No hand-holding. They were careful, but not careful enough. Because on the third evening, Elena captured them exiting the same suite at 7:02 a.m. Together. Andrew's hand on her lower back. Vanessa smiling like she'd already won. I watched the video in my car parked outside the office, heater humming low. I didn't cry. I saved the file and uploaded it to my encrypted drive. That same week, I changed the locks on the upstairs office. The one Andrew never used anyway. It became my war room. Inside, I pinned timelines to the corkboard, printed maps. Synced cloud folders with labeled subfiles. Vanessa, real estate activity. Andrew, travel patterns, assets and transfers, PI footage, backup. Some nights I played Sarah's old jazz records. Let them fill the room with the sound of something that wasn't betrayal. Let the saxophone drown out the ache. One morning while folding laundry, I found a lipstick-stained napkin in Andrew's coat pocket, not mine. A deep mauve, too bold for me. I placed it gently in a Ziploc bag, dated it, filed it. At work I acted normal. I made copies, took minutes, ordered catering. I even smiled. But I'd already decided when the curtain would fall. The firm's annual holiday dinner was coming up. Formal. Full attendance. Lawyers, partners, clients, spouses. Andrew would be there. So would Vanessa. The guest list confirmed it. She'd been invited as part of the commercial real estate expansion team. It was perfect. Public enough for consequences. Intimate enough for silence to speak louder than rage. Janelle helped me pick the dress. A navy sheath. Classic. Paired with the pearl earrings my mother left me. I hadn't worn them in years. "Are you sure you're ready?" she asked. "I'm not angry," I said. Just done. That night I stood in front of the mirror, slid my wedding ring back onto my finger. Just for the optics. Not to lie, but to let him see exactly what he was throwing away. And maybe what I'd already taken back. Have you ever prepared for something quietly knowing it would change everything I did? And I knew there was no turning back. I arrived at the dinner 20 minutes early. Enough time to check the layout, confirm the seating, and let the tension settle in my bones before anyone else arrived. The ballroom at the Crescent Hotel shimmered with soft lighting and low jazz, tall centerpieces, folded linen napkins, gold-rimmed glassware. It looked exactly like a celebration. Perfect. My table was near the front, just left of the podium. I'd made sure of that. One of the perks of managing event logistics for the senior partners, no one questioned where I sat. I placed a small envelope beneath Andrew's name card. Not dramatic, just waiting. Inside was a single printout, one still from Elena's video. Andrew, Vanessa, early morning outside the suite. No commentary, no confrontation. Just evidence. Clean. Undeniable. I took my seat and watched the room begin to fill. Vanessa walked in first. Alone. Wearing a deep emerald dress and a smile so composed it almost fooled me. She scanned the room, found her table, and paused only briefly when she noticed mine. She didn't wave. She didn't have to. A woman like Vanessa didn't bother acknowledging staff, especially not staff who knew everything. Andrew arrived 6 minutes later. Still adjusting his cufflinks, greeting colleagues, slipping into his charming persona like an old jacket. He spotted me. Hesitated. Then walked over, kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. "You look beautiful," he said. "I know," I replied. He blinked, but smiled. The show was starting. As guests trickled in, I made small talk. About whether end-of-year bonuses, which dessert would be served. I kept my voice level, my posture straight, my wine untouched. At exactly 7:05 p.m., Vanessa walked past our table on her way to the restroom. Andrew turned his head just slightly. That reflex. That flicker of attention he couldn't suppress. He caught her eyes, and I caught his. He didn't speak to her. Not here. Not yet. But that second, that slip, was enough. I leaned toward him. "You should check under your name card." He froze. Then slowly lifted the envelope. He slid the photo out, held it beneath the table. Eyes darting, breath shortening. He looked at me. And for the first time in months, really looked. "Margaret," I raised a hand. "I don't want to talk here." He swallowed hard. The flush in his face traveled all the way to his ears. I stood. Walked toward the coat check. He followed like I knew he would. In the dim hallway near the kitchen entrance, I turned to face him. "You've been planning your exit," I said. Carefully, quietly, strategically. He opened his mouth, but no words came. "I've been doing the same." He blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything, Andrew. The money. The texts. The hotel. Vanessa. He took a step back. You went through my stuff, you erased me from my own life. So yes, I went through what was mine. He looked down. Silent. I'm not here to fight, I said. My lawyer already has everything. So does Elena. If you're smart, you'll agree to the terms. Quietly. I can explain number, I smiled. A real one. Tired but real. You can respond to the filing next week. Until then, enjoy the party. Vanessa's just over there if you want to start posing early. He didn't follow me back inside. At the table, no one noticed he was gone. I ate 3 bites of salmon, sipped half a glass of wine, smiled at the partner's wife next to me who complimented my earrings. When dessert was served, I excused myself, said I had a headache. On the way out, I passed Vanessa. She looked up. Our eyes met. I nodded. She opened her mouth maybe to speak, but I didn't slow down. Because I had nothing left to say to either of them. My story was no longer theirs to twist. When I got home, I lit a candle in the kitchen. Not for atmosphere. For peace. I sat with a cup of peppermint tea. No makeup. No ring. Just me. I looked around the house, the one I'd built, cleaned, cooked in, raised a daughter in. And I knew I'd be leaving it soon. But not empty, not broken. On Monday morning, the email would go out. Separation of accounts. Filing notices. Next steps. I'd meet with Marissa and sign the final authorization. Split the assets. Keep what mattered. It was already in motion, and I felt nothing but calm, because justice, I'd learned, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it unfolds on linen-covered tables with one envelope, one glance, one carefully planned step. Monday morning came with stillness. The kind you feel when a storm has passed but the sky hasn't quite cleared. I woke before my alarm. No makeup, no earrings. No need to pretend. Andrew's side of the bed was cold. He hadn't come home after the firm dinner. I didn't need to ask where he went. I already knew. I made coffee, my roast, not his. I drank it on the patio wrapped in my favorite robe, watching the neighbor's dog chase leaves down the sidewalk. Peace looks ordinary, I've learned. Quiet, warm, unapologetic. At 9:17 a.m., I clicked send. The subject line, notice of intent to file. I sent it to Andrew, to Marissa, to the accountant. Attached were the documents, divorce terms, asset breakdown, evidence files, a signed request for full separation of property and bank access. No threats, no demands. Just facts, sharp, clean, final. An hour later he called. I didn't answer. At noon, a message came through, Margaret, please. Can we talk? I didn't mean for it to get this far. Too late. He'd had years to talk. At 3:12 p.m., Vanessa called my office line. How she got the number, I wasn't sure. Maybe from Andrew. Maybe from one of the firm directories she shouldn't have had access to. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was clipped, measured. Hi, Margaret. I know things have gotten messy. I hope we can move forward without hostility. This wasn't personal. That made me laugh. Not bitter, just tired. I forwarded the message to Marissa. She replied with one line, do not engage. They're trying to get ahead of the fallout. By Friday, it had begun. Whispers at the office. A partner from the litigation team leaned in during a coffee break and said, you didn't deserve that. Everyone's talking. Everyone's on your side. I didn't want sides. I wanted clarity. But it was happening. The unraveling. Vanessa was quietly removed from the real estate bid. A polite email thanking her for her time, citing internal conflict of interest. Andrew missed 2 meetings. Rumors swirled something about violated ethics policies and personal misconduct. I kept my head down. But my presence now said something different, not wife of. Not the quiet one. I had become the woman who didn't flinch. The fallout didn't explode. It cracked. Little by little, Andrew's name came up in hushed tones. Not loud enough to make headlines, but enough to bruise his image. He'd built a reputation on being solid, controlled, clean. Now he looked sloppy. 1 week after the dinner, I found an envelope in the mailbox, no stamp, no return address. Inside the pearl necklace he gave me on our 10th anniversary. No note. I slid it into the donation pile. I was done with symbols of love that came from guilt. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Too many receipts, too many names, too much data for him to deny. He signed everything. Didn't fight. Didn't show up in person. Only his lawyer did, meek and rushed. I left with half our assets. More than I expected, more than I needed. What mattered most? The clean break. The house sold. The new account mine only. The name Ellis soon to be changed. Sarah came home that weekend. She hugged me longer than usual. Didn't ask for details. Just said, "You look lighter." I was. We ate pizza on the living room floor, watched a Hallmark movie, and yelled at the plot holes. She laughed until she cried. So did I. It didn't fix everything, but it felt like a beginning. 2 weeks later, Vanessa quit the contract. She said she needed a break from the business. Andrew, from what I heard, went on a leave of absence. People stopped saying his name around me. Not out of avoidance, but out of quiet respect. The best kind of justice isn't loud. It's when they realize the cost of what they thought they could keep secret. It's when you walk away, and they're left explaining your silence. On the last day of the year, I stood in the empty hallway of what used to be our home. The echo of my footsteps was the only sound. No more pictures on the wall. No more curated perfection, just space. I left the keys on the counter, turned out the lights, closed the door behind me. My car was warm from the sun. The trunk held one suitcase, one box of documents, and my grandmother's quilt. It was enough. I drove to the apartment I'd rented near Freedom Park. Modest, clean, mine. I didn't cry when I walked in. I hung one photo on the wall, me and Sarah on the beach. That was it. That night I poured a glass of wine. Not to numb, to mark the end. I stood by the window watching the lights of the city flicker. And I whispered I did it. My apartment still creaks when the heater kicks in. The windows rattle faintly when it's windy. And sometimes the fridge hums loud enough to feel like a conversation. But it's quiet here in the way my old life never was. Not empty. Not anxious. Just still. Like the quiet that settles after a storm you didn't know you'd survive. I've been here for 3 months now. Just me, a second-hand kitchen table, 2 bookshelves, and a plant Sarah insisted I couldn't kill. So far, she's right. Each morning starts slow. I grind my own coffee beans now. I light a candle before the sun rises. I sit in silence before I open a single email. And I don't miss the sound of keys jangling at 7:15 p.m. I don't miss wondering who he was texting. I don't miss shrinking myself so someone else could feel important. Some nights I still wake up reaching for the other side of the bed. It's not grief, it's memory. Faded but familiar, like walking through a house you once knew in the dark. The first weekend after the move, I found a box labeled Wedding Keep. I didn't remember packing it. Inside were the kinds of things that used to matter. RSVP cards, a ribbon from my bouquet, a thank you note from his mother, the champagne cork we swore we'd save forever. I sat on the floor for over an hour, that box in my lap. The sun had shifted across the living room by the time I finally stood up. Not crying, not angry, just letting every cell in my body remember what it once believed in. Hope can be a kind liar sometimes. Then I closed the lid, wrote "Dawn It" on the side, and left it by the door. Because I've spent enough of my life archiving a version of myself that didn't exist anymore. Sarah comes over on Sundays. We make omelets or pancakes depending on our mood. She plays the same Taylor Swift playlist she's loved since 8th grade. Last week she caught me dancing barefoot in the kitchen. What, I asked, laughing. "You just seem lighter," she said. "Like the air around you is different." It is. I told her she could invite her dad over sometime if she wanted. She shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Maybe not ever." And that's okay. Some wounds don't heal with time, they heal with truth. I'm not pushing her either way. I'm not rewriting what he was to her. But I am rewriting what I am to myself. I've started journaling again. At first, just one sentence each night. Now it's pages. Some entries are quiet. Slept through the night. No dreams. Made rosemary potatoes for one, and it felt like a feast. Didn't think of him until I folded the laundry, and even then I let the thought pass. Others are bolder, I am not disposable. I won't apologize for asking questions that deserved answers. Love is not a stage I must perform on. I never show these pages to anyone. But someday I might leave them for Sarah. So if she ever forgets her worth, she'll know she came from someone who found hers again. There's a quiet rebellion in doing things for yourself. Choosing your own curtains. Playing music no one else likes. Buying the fancy lotion because you love how it smells. I don't ask permission to enjoy my life anymore. I don't explain why I prefer silence over company, and I no longer lower my voice to make someone else comfortable. I rest now. Not as reward, but as a right. Last Thursday, I passed a little jewelry shop tucked between a coffee house and a bookstore. In the window was a slender silver ring, minimal, quiet, strong. It reminded me of who I am now. That night, I pulled Andrew's wedding band from the back of my drawer. Held it in my hand. Felt its weight, not of metal but of all the lies it used to represent. The next morning, I brought it to a local goldsmith. No story. No tears. Just melt this down, make something new. It'll be ready next week. A narrow band reshaped, worn on my right hand, with an engraving inside. Still standing. Because I am. Because I will be. Vanessa left town, I heard. No farewell post. No explanation. Just gone. Like a chapter that ends mid-sentence. Andrew took a sabbatical. Then quietly resigned. Someone told me he's consulting remotely now, out of state. Invisible, like all cowards eventually become. And me, I'm still here. Still sipping my coffee slowly. Still opening windows for no reason. Still finding beauty in the ordinary. Some mornings I pass couples laughing over brunch, hands brushing as they cross the street. And I feel something, but it's not envy. It's clarity. Because now I understand love doesn't fix you. It reflects you. I don't need someone to complete me. I want someone who can meet me equal, honest, unafraid of the full truth. Until then, I have enough. More than enough. I started volunteering quietly, helping women rebuild after financial betrayal. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who knows what it feels like to lose your footing and find it again. Sometimes we just sit in silence together. Sometimes I help them sort through receipts and credit card charges. Sometimes I remind them, you are not crazy, you are not alone. And you are not the problem. We don't always find closure, but we always find clarity. I've begun marking seasons with rituals again. Fresh linens in spring, apple crisp in October. A pine wreath in December, even if it's just me. These small things make a life. And now finally that life is mine. Sometimes I find old photos tucked into books. Me in a different house, holding a glass of wine, smiling at someone I no longer recognize. I don't throw them out, but I don't pin them up either. They belong to someone I loved, but not someone I need to return to. Closure, I've learned, isn't something they give you. It's what you claim for yourself. One quiet decision at a time. It's in changing the locks, cooking just for you, smiling at your own reflection. Choosing solitude over performative love. It's not dramatic, it's deliberate. And it's powerful. So here I am, 46. Divorced. Steady, not bitter, not broken, just whole. If I could go back and whisper something to the woman I was a year ago, the one holding a boutique receipt in her kitchen hand, trembling, I would say, you will not shatter. You will not disappear. And you will not stay stuck, because I didn't, and neither will you. Have you ever reclaimed your life after betrayal, one quiet decision at a time? Tell me in the comments. You never know who might be waiting to hear a voice just like yours. You are not invisible, you are not alone, and your story is far from over. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more real stories of justice, healing, and quiet strength after 40.